The rain was coming down in sheets as I drove home from the office that Friday. Chicago was a city that could wear you down, but I usually found solace in the familiar comfort of my apartment, and more importantly in the arms of my wife, Genevieve. I was an architect, a job I loved, designing spaces that hopefully made people's lives a little better. Genevieve was a freelance writer, and her work allowed her to be home, which I always appreciated. We'd been married for 7 years, a good run, or so I thought. We met at a gallery opening, a chance encounter that felt like destiny. She was vibrant, intelligent, and had a laugh that could light up a room. I fell hard, and she seemingly did too. We built a life together, a comfortable life filled with weekend trips, dinner parties with friends, and the quiet intimacy of shared evenings. But lately, things had felt off. Genevieve had become distant, preoccupied. Her laughter didn't ring as true, and her eyes held a sadness I couldn't decipher. I chalked it up to stress, the pressures of her work, maybe even a touch of seasonal depression. Chicago winters were brutal. As I pulled into the parking garage, I decided tonight would be different. I'd make a nice dinner, open a bottle of wine, and we'd talk. Really talk. I needed to reconnect with her to understand what was going on. When I walked into the apartment, the air was thick with an unfamiliar scent. It wasn't her usual perfume, more musky, more masculine, and then I heard it. A muffled moan coming from our bedroom. My heart lurched. I stood frozen, a statue of dread in my own hallway. I crept towards the bedroom door, my hand trembling as I reached for the knob. The door wasn't fully closed, a sliver of light escaping into the hallway. I pushed it open just enough to see. The scene that unfolded before me was like a punch to the gut, a searing brand on my soul. Genevieve was in our bed, tangled in the sheets, with a man I didn't recognize. He was younger, with a lean build and a cocky smirk on his face. Even in the throes of passion, time seemed to slow to a crawl. The blood drained from my face. My breath hitched in my throat. This couldn't be happening, not to me, not to us. I stumbled backward, away from the door, away from the image that would forever be burned into my memory. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I needed to get out. I turned and ran out of the apartment, out of the building, into the rain-soaked streets of Chicago. I ended up at a dive bar a few blocks away, a place I'd never been before. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and cheap beer, the music a low, thumping drone. I ordered a whiskey neat and downed it in one gulp. It burned going down, but it did little to soothe the fire in my chest. I sat there for hours, nursing my drinks, replaying the scene in my head over and over again. Genevieve, in our bed, with another man. The betrayal was a physical ache, a gaping wound in my heart. Finally, as the sky began to lighten, I decided I couldn't stay away any longer. I had to confront her. I had to know why. When I got back to the apartment, it was silent. The bed was empty, the sheets rumpled. Genevieve was in the kitchen making coffee as if nothing had happened. "Elias, you're back early," she said, her voice calm, almost too calm. "I thought you were working late." "Who was he, Genevieve?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She froze, her eyes widening slightly. "Who was who?" she stammered. "Don't play dumb with me," I said, my voice rising. "I saw you in our bed with another man." Tears welled up in her eyes, but they didn't look like tears of remorse. They looked like tears of annoyance. "Elias, it's not what you think," she said, her voice trembling. "Oh, really?" "Because it looked exactly like what I think," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "It was a mistake," she said. "A moment of weakness." "A mistake, a moment of weakness. You were having sex with another man in our bed, Genevieve. That's not a mistake, that's a betrayal." "I'm sorry," she said, but the words felt hollow, empty. "Who is he?" I asked again. She hesitated for a moment, then sighed. "His name is Jasper. He's a writer I met at a conference." "A writer?" "Of course. Someone in her own world, someone who understood her, someone who apparently satisfied her in ways I didn't." "How long has this been going on?" I asked. "A few weeks," she admitted, her eyes downcast. "A few weeks. And all this time she'd been lying to me, deceiving me, making me believe that everything was fine." "I don't understand," I said, my voice cracking. "I thought we were happy. I thought we had something special." "We did," she said. "But things have been stale lately. I felt like we were drifting apart." "So you decided to have an affair instead of talking to me?" I asked, incredulous. "I know it was wrong," she said, "but I didn't know what else to do." I stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman I loved with the woman who stood before me, a stranger in my own home. I couldn't. The trust was gone, shattered into a million pieces. "I want you to leave," I said, my voice flat. "Elias, please," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Don't do this. We can work through this. We can go to therapy. There's nothing to work through, Genevieve," I said. "You broke us. You destroyed everything we had. I want you gone." She didn't argue. She packed a bag, her movements slow and deliberate. As she walked out the door, she turned and looked at me, her eyes filled with regret. "I'm sorry, Elias," she said. "I truly am." And then she was gone, leaving me alone in the apartment, surrounded by the ghosts of our past. The next few weeks were a blur. I went through the motions of my life, going to work, paying the bills, but I felt like a zombie just going through the motions. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The pain was constant, a dull ache that never went away. I told a few of my friends what had happened, and they were supportive, offering words of comfort and shoulders to cry on. But no one could truly understand the depth of my pain, the feeling of being betrayed by the one person I trusted most in the world. I started seeing a therapist, a kind woman named Imogen, who helped me to process my emotions and to start to heal. She told me that I wasn't to blame for Genevieve's actions, that her choices were a reflection of her own insecurities and unhappiness. It was hard to believe, but I tried. I clung to her words, searching for some semblance of hope in the darkness. One day, Imogen suggested that I try to focus on myself, on rediscovering the things that made me happy before Genevieve came into my life. It was a daunting task, but I decided to give it a try. I started going to the gym again, working out my frustrations and anxieties. I started painting, something I hadn't done since college. I reconnected with old friends, going out for drinks and laughing until my sides hurt. Slowly, gradually, I started to feel like myself again. The pain was still there, but it wasn't as sharp, as all-consuming. I started to see a future for myself, a future that didn't involve Genevieve. Then one day I received a letter in the mail. It was from a law firm informing me that Genevieve was seeking a divorce. I wasn't surprised, but it still stung. The divorce proceedings were relatively straightforward. We had no children and our assets were easily divided. I didn't ask for anything more than what I was entitled to. I just wanted it to be over. As the divorce was finalized, I felt a sense of closure, a sense of finally being able to move on. But I also felt a lingering sadness, a sense of loss for the future we would never have. A few months later, I ran into a friend of Genevieve's, a woman named Blythe, at a coffee shop. We exchanged pleasantries, and then she said, "I heard about what happened with Genevieve." "I'm so sorry, Elias." "Thank you," I said. "I always thought you two were so happy." She said, "So did I said. Then she hesitated for a moment and said, "There's something I think you should know about Genevieve and Jasper." My heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" I asked. "Their affair, it wasn't just a few weeks," she said. "It had been going on for almost a year, a whole year. Genevieve had been lying to me, deceiving me for an entire year." The pain washed over me again, even stronger than before. "And there's something else," Blythe said, her voice barely a whisper. "Jasper, he's not just a writer. He's married. Genevieve had been having an affair with a married man. The hypocrisy was staggering. His wife, her name is Coralie. She doesn't know," Blythe said. "I thought you should know. I couldn't keep it a secret any longer." I thanked Blythe for telling me, and we parted ways. I walked home in a daze, trying to process what I had just learned. Genevieve had not only betrayed me, she had also betrayed Coralie. And Jasper, he was a serial cheater, a man who had no regard for the feelings of others. I didn't know what to do. Should I tell Coralie? Should I confront Genevieve and Jasper? Or should I just let it go and move on with my life? After much deliberation, I decided that Coralie deserved to know the truth. I tracked her down on social media and sent her a message, explaining who I was and what I knew. To my surprise, she responded almost immediately. She was shocked and devastated by the news, but she was also grateful that I had told her. We talked for hours, sharing our stories of betrayal and heartbreak. We discovered that we had a lot in common, and we formed a bond of solidarity. Coralie confronted Jasper, and he denied everything at first. But when she presented him with the evidence I had provided, he finally confessed. She kicked him out of their house and filed for divorce. She was angry and hurt, but she was also determined to move on with her life. Genevieve, on the other hand, was furious with me for telling Coralie. She accused me of trying to ruin her life, of being vindictive and spiteful. I didn't care. I had done what I thought was right, and I had no regrets. In the end, Genevieve and Jasper's affair imploded. Their relationship couldn't withstand the weight of their lies and betrayals. They broke up, and both of them were left alone to face the consequences of their actions. As for me, I continued to heal and to move on with my life. I focused on my work, my friends, and my own happiness. I started dating again cautiously, and I eventually found someone who loved and respected me for who I was. I never forgave Genevieve for what she had done, but I learned to accept it. I realized that her actions were not a reflection of me, but of her own flaws and insecurities. And I learned that even after the most devastating betrayals, it is possible to heal, to grow, and to find happiness again. Life in Chicago continued. The rain still fell, the wind still blew, but I was no longer defined by the darkness of my past. I was free, and I was ready to embrace the future, whatever it may hold.